So this video continues from the previous. So Frank Lloyd Wright decided he wanted a home out west, and he called it Taliesin West. And this was his home where he lived the last part of his life. He left Taliesin East. Of course, when he called it Taliesin, he didn't know there was going to be a west, so it wasn't really Taliesin East. We named it East later, and you can see the evolution of his design here as he moved out west, and the incorporation of the stone from the area. He did also have a school he ran out here, and it was in Arizona, by the way, until he died, 91. I thought it was 92. And it was, once again, he used the natural terrain to help drive his style. And you can see the Prairie style now has become really its own separate entity. Whereas before we saw very clear ties to Craftsman, Art Deco, and Art Nouveau. Those are almost completely gone here. And there it is from the aerial. So as always, his designs are complex. They almost to me look like, animal bones that you would see in the desert. Here's a floor plan. He's off-grid now. Remember, before everything was on-grid. Now we've got some really off-grid stuff. Love that space. There used to be tables in here. This was a studio, work studio. And as he was prone to do, he was always altering or adding to the buildings. And he had them constructed by students. His students, those that were accepted into the Prairie School, were not just designers; they were builders. I mean, that is the definition of architect: architect, master builder. And he would have them. One of their first assignments, and he had them out at Taliesin East as well. But one of his first assignments would be that they would have to build their own shelter, and then they would have to live in it. Talk about learning. I mean, you really learn a lot that way. Sort of did that with when I bought my house. I bought a house. I told my real estate agent that I wanted a house that I could fix up, and I'm a mid-century modern gal, so it was a mid-century modern house that that could be restored. And you learn a lot about a house by living in one, especially one that you have to repair and renovate. And of course, things go wrong after you buy a house. Things invariably go wrong after you buy the house that were not seen in the inspection, because it's just how it is. And conversely, I kept expecting the heat pump in this house is like 32 years old and still going, and has been, I thought it was on its deathbed when I bought the house. So I was anticipating that I would have to install a new heat pump and new system. Still going. So you just never know sometimes. Okay, so here's another view, and you see he liked to put water in the desert here because this is beautiful. Right, because it provided a swimming pool, but also the beautiful blue contrasting the desert red. The front door. And this is inside that room that was the studio that we talked about. Very different terrain. It's more different view. Very complex. It's nice to be able to go out and hit one of his buildings and walk around. And he had in his gardens, you'll see a lot of Japanese art and architecture that when he went to Japan, he bought and had sent back to the United States. And so you'll see that throughout his living space. So I put this in here to show you. So he did the mullions along the window. And then when he got here, there's no mullion. There's just glass up against stone. And the only reason that's not like the worst possible thing you could do in the desert in Arizona is that the temperatures are relatively the same, because this is shaded in an overhang. In the shade, in the desert, the temperatures are relatively stable year round. And so there's not a large expansion and contraction going on. Plus, he also used wood and stone that doesn't expand or contract a lot, like metal. And so this has not cracked. And it just looks like there's some caulking there. I wouldn't recommend doing that. Especially would not recommend doing that here where our temperature fluctuations are so drastic. But because he did this in the desert, and while the temperatures do fluctuate themselves, I mean, it can get really cold in the desert at night, the sun has hit the stone during the day, it's absorbed it, and it's releasing it. And there you go. And so that was part of what he knew and what he did, and why we're looking at his work and in multiple parts of a lecture. That was a lecture room. So you can see he's one of the first people that came up with this idea to put little tiny light bulbs on the ceiling. That later caught on and now everybody does it. Opening up more, a skylight, right? As time goes by and our technology gets better, he's able to do more things like this. What a great space. And there he is. He almost looks like I put this in as the last slide. He almost looks like a ghost in his own studio. What's left of his legacy is very, very potent, very strong. And he has contributed greatly to the American residents. And that is why we have looked at him individually as an architect, as a author of a style of architecture, and as in the history of residential design, he is one of the giants. Love him, like him or leave him, he still has had a very profound effect on where we are in residential building design today. Okay, going to stop this one here, and we will wrap up with the last style, international style, in the next video.